So once you open up Unity, we are going to be adding materials to our objects, which is basically, for our purpose, just going to be colors to them. So we're going to go to our material tabs, right click, and then we're going to go create material. It's right there. And then we're just going to name this one table. So some things I'm capitalizing, some things I'm lowercase, making them lowercase. It doesn't really matter. For this point in encoding, there's some times where you're supposed to use capitalized and lowercase. Not really, you're not forced to use it, but it's just kind of helpful to be more organized. But for anything you're naming in Unity, I guess tend to stick with lowercase, but you can use capitalized. It doesn't really matter that much. So we're gonna add table, and up here, the main thing we're gonna be changing is this right here. So once this comes up, once this opens up, if you click it, there's going to be a color menu. The recording software I'm using doesn't actually have that, or like it's not showing up on it, so you're not going to be able to see it. But if you click it, you'll kind of see a color thing. If you have used like image software or coloring software before, this should look pretty familiar. But essentially, there's a ring on the outside, which will determine which color it is, and then the kind of square on the middle is if you want a certain shade, which actually you can see down here that I'm changing it. The other option is there's a color picker here, so this will actually scan through, and you can see that the color is changing. So it looks through the whole screen. Say if you wanted like exactly the shade of green, you could just scan over it and then click it, and then it'll match that color. But for a table, we're going to be wanting to do a brown, which you can do brown kind of with any color, but for some reason, if you do like a dark orange, that always looks brown. So I'm just going to do something like that. And last thing, we're going to hold down this table and drag it on, or the table material, drag it onto the table itself, and now it turns brown. Also, if you want to edit, if you just want to like change the color later, you can do it directly here. See, if I go like this, then it actually changes it again. So it changes directly onto there. And I'm just gonna Control Z that. So I'm gonna add the other 3 colors off screen, and I added the board. Here, I'm just gonna add the board in here. You can drag and drop each one onto it just to see how it looks. Let me center this real quick. So yeah, I'm gonna just quickly make all 3 of them just to see how they look. And this is kind of just your interpretation. It won't actually affect anything in it. Just try to pick whatever colors looks best to you. So I'll see you after I add those 3 in. So I forgot to say, for the pieces, you're going to want to name it player 1 and player 2. That'll just make it easier. So when we're going to be referring to like the object, we're just going to be calling it a piece, but we're going to say that like red is player 1 and yellow is player 2 for the remainder of this series. So after you add these, we are now going to be setting up our scene. So first I'm going to want to put this board roughly in the middle. Actually, let me just check if it's scaled right. It should be. It's like if I just roughly try to see if this piece kind of fits in there. Okay, it looks pretty dark, but you can see how this piece does kind of fit in there, and each piece will be right next to it, and the hole's like just about the right size. But you can tell if it's about in the hole. And if we add another one, like if I go here, duplicate real quick, you can see that they fit pretty nicely in it. So that means we don't actually have to affect the scale of this. But over here in rotation, the thing with Blender is that it uses a different X, Y, and Z as Unity. It's hard to explain, but if you remember in Blender, Z was actually up, and you can go check it. The Z-axis was up, but in Unity the Y-axis is up. So when you import one to the other, it automatically adds this -90 offset that will self-correct it basically. But that can be a problem sometimes later when you're trying to add in objects, because sometimes it'll just add it with 0 rotation, and then it'll be sideways, and that's not what you want. But it looks like for this object, we're going to want to make this 90. Actually, yeah, let's see here. Positive x is over there. I just want to see what direction this needs to be in. Yeah, so positive x over there. Okay, so yeah, we're going to be adding them in the x-axis. Since this game is kind of like a 2D version, like say this is going to be the x-axis and this is the y-axis. If you remember from high school math, we're going to be using some like x, y, and z. You don't really have to know that much math, but and when you start programming, there's a decent amount of math you have to know. Not really super hard, but mostly like adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, stuff like that. But it's good to know. Anyways, so we have x and y. So when we add in another piece, it'll be 1 unit across. And you can actually see that. So right now it's roughly -4. If we add another one, it'll be -3. And we're actually going to center this board. Let's see here. So I'm going to move this to 0, 0, 0. So then I want the board to be right on top of that. So let's see right there. Because I want that piece to actually fall right on 0, 0, 0. See if I go like this. Yeah, the actual, like with Blender you can actually, or like with Blender you can click these things. You can do the same thing in Unity. Let's see here, so this should be 0. Actually, it might actually be, I think that I'll just go back a little bit more. I think there looks fine. So once we have that, we're going to want to move this table over there too. Move it down right about here. So obviously this table is way too small for this board, so we're going to go over here and scale it up. Let's try 12. That's a bit too big. Let's see, we have 5. Still a bit too. 3. Oop. Supposed to be a 2. I think that looks fine. Doesn't have to be perfect, and this is just kind of aesthetic. We have a small table. Y, we'll just add 2 again. And this will add a 2. And then again, move it down a bit. That's another thing with Blender. For some reason, when it imports it, it doesn't like to get it to exactly -90. It likes to give it to this number usually, which is, I mean, you can tell it's really close. It's only 0.02 off from -90. So I just like to put it at a flat -90. And it probably won't affect anything. So next we're going to add a few of these pieces. You can just drag and drop them, but we're just going to be wanting to move them right next to the board, just to make it a bit more of a playful scene. You can do this however you want, but I'm just going to rest this piece on top of here. You don't technically have to do this. This is all aesthetic, but it'll just give the game a bit more flavor, because this will look a little bit boring, and it's one of those things that like people won't actually notice. Like if you tell somebody, hey, you're playing the game, and then it'll be like, wait, that was actually in there. There were all these pieces. It's like something that you kind of expect. There's other stuff in like that in games or even movies, or there's a lot of different things that have it where it's like kind of you just unconsciously kind of think about it. But this is one of those things where it just really adds to it without the people. It's one of those unappreciated things that really adds to it. Let's see. I'll rest this one over here. And you can do as many as you want. I'm just kind of doing a bit. The only thing is try to make it so that, like, see, you can see how this piece is kind of resting on this one. Just try to make sure it's at least physically possible, because that will be a definite giveaway that this game's fake, which it kind of is. This is like more of a simulation of it. But if a piece, say for example like this one here, was like right here the whole time, you know, not even ignoring the fact that it's in front of all these holes that will cover up the board. But if you're playing a game and you just saw this floating thing there, it might ruin the experience. And this one you can actually delete, unless you want to add it in there. But I think this looks fine for me. And the last thing we're going to do with these pieces is just quickly put them or organize them up here. So we're just going to create empty, rename this, either you click on it there or change it there. We just name it decoration pieces, and then we're going to click all these. If you hold down control, you can select multiple things, or you can just drag each one in individually. So we're just going to drag it and drop it into there. So that's what these empties are also good for, is being more organized, because this basically acts like a folder would here. So now we can just drop it, and now there's less stuff for us to worry about. The next thing we're going to be doing is setting up the camera. So if we go to main camera, same thing here, and this is why it's good to have the game tab there. You can also see a mini version here. We're just going to set it up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but this is just so we can roughly get a good idea of what it's going to look like. And you can also go back and add more of these pieces in here if you want to, but I'm going to add it like here. If you also want to, you can add it back. Like right now, you can't even see like all the work you did on the table, but it's always helpful to always have this information here, because say if I was like right here, but then I decided, oh, I want to zoom back a bit, so it's still helpful to have extra detail in here. But you know, at least for what I want to do, like if you added a lot of extra details, it's not actually going to show. But where you actually put the camera doesn't really matter, as long as you can see each of these rows comfortably and they're not super tiny. Like if it was all the way back here, that it would be kind of hard to click an individual one. So right there looks good for me. The next thing we're going to be doing is adding some more lighting in here. I'm going to change the lighting to exactly white. Unity gives this like slightly yellow tint on it, I guess to mimic the sun, but I'm just going to be doing pure white. You can really do whatever color you want. Like you can do an orangish again. Like say if I want to do an extreme blue, it wouldn't look good. But if you really wanted to, you can add really dramatic lighting. Or if you add multiple lighting, that can also look cool. So we're going to go to here, duplicate it. And the scene got twice as bright just then. That's just because the light doubled. So if you want to, you can go in the settings here, go to intensity, and we're just going to tone it down. We're going to make each of them 0.5, so it's 50%. And the whole point of having multiple lights is that you can rotate it. So we're going to rotation, and you can see on the ground that there's the shadows are moving. I don't like to have two lights with shadows. I think it's okay to have one, but this looks kind of weird. So on shadow type, I'm going to set this to no shadows. So the lighting still applies, and it'll still light up more of the scene, but it won't show two shadows. So let's go like right there. With these lights, it doesn't actually matter. Say like I want to move them like around. I can move these anywhere I want. With these directional lights, it doesn't matter where they're at. It just kind of, the only thing that matters is the rotation. I don't think the scale even matters either. Yeah, scale doesn't affect it. It's just the rotation for these settings. And I'm going to be doing the same thing here. Create empty and add, or I'll just call it light. And drag and drop both those in. You can have more lights if you want, but this is just what I'm going to be using. So the last thing we're going to be doing is setting up the pieces. So when we press play, they'll fall down and they'll interact with each other. So we're going to go to our models just start with 2 pieces here. Drag them out. And let's see. Rotate it -90. Actually, wait. Oh, that's the wrong side. So we actually wanted this to be 180. So when they fall down, you'll see this end. 180. Oh, and if you didn't know, the rotation's based on 360 degrees. So if I like put this at 360, it won't do anything because that's a full resolution. Or not resolution, revolution? I forgot exactly what it's called. So when we have these, we're gonna add the materials again. So we'll say player 1, player 2. And we're actually gonna rename these real quick to, let's see, player 1. Player 2. Now we're gonna go add component here. And we're gonna be adding first a rigid body. So rigid body gives the thing gravity, like right here, gravity. It essentially does all the physics for us. So now the object will interact with physics and have like physics properties. So that means when we press play, the object will fall down. The only thing is, for a rigid body to work, it also has to have a box collider. Or actually any type of colliders. There's other types, like if I type collider, you can see all these different types of colliders. But for what we're going to be using, we're just going to be using box collider. It's the simplest one. So there's that one. And now we're going to be adding it to the other piece. Adding the box collider and the rigid body. Now if we press play real quick, you can see this game view. They're falling down. Which obviously, it was a problem that they fell through the table. We'll fix that later. But I mean, it's kind of funny for the first time if you've never seen it, that this thing, because this table doesn't actually have any colliders on it itself. So right now these will literally just fall through anything. Even if it looks like it shouldn't go through it. So once we have both of these pieces, we're gonna go to the prefabs folder and drag and drop each one in it. So something will pop up saying, would you like to create a new original prefab or a variant? So we're just gonna click original. And what that does is creates a whole new one, because it's this thing right here. You can kind of see the symbol. It's kind of weird. It's like a cube, but there's like a notch cut out of it. So that's kind of like the model symbol, which means that it came from a model. But then when it's a cube that's full, that means it's actually a prefab from Unity. I think this actually might not be just a model. That's like an import in general, or something that's not made from Unity. But when we drag and dropped it, it told Unity that we're making a different one, and it's not actually going to be associated with this piece anymore. It's going to be its own separate thing. Anyways, that was a bit over explained, but we're going to just be doing the same thing, original prefab, and now we have both our pieces in. So now if we delete both of these, so we can delete this one and delete this one, and if we drag and drop these back into the scene, it has all of our settings on it again, which will be helpful later, especially when we want to spawn the pieces in. All we have to do is just say spawn in this piece here, instead of having to like add all the settings back onto it and start from scratch. So that is the end of this video. The next video, we're gonna finally start coding. And before you X out of Unity, just remember to go File Save, or you can do Control S again.